And Adam, you've been following this very closely. First and foremost, I just want to ask you, how strong do you think the government's case is here? And how many years potentially could Sam Bankman-Fried be looking at in prison?
I think the government has a very strong case here. It's got tens of thousands of pages of records that include texts, emails, financial transactions. I mean, that's one thing about these kinds of cases that involve securities fraud, bank fraud, is that you have the financial transactions, you can follow the money. And then on top of that, you've got three very high-level cooperators that have agreed to testify against Bankman-Fried. The government's got, I would say from the outside, what looks like a slam dunk kind of a case. In terms of the amount of time that Bankman-Fried faces, he faces under the statutes up to 110 years. That's, of course, not how courts actually fashion sentences. They use something called the sentencing guidelines. They look at the specific characteristics of the case and the defendant in fashioning an appropriate sentence. All that being said, I would expect Judge Kaplan, if Bankman-Fried is ultimately convicted, to impose an extremely long period of incarceration. We're talking decades. This is, after all, one of the biggest fraud schemes in history. So I think 30, 40 years potentially at a minimum.
Adam, I sort of have a related process question here because, for those of us in the financial media, it would be surprising if someone had not at least heard of this case, right? Is it going to be tough for them to do jury selection to find people who have not made up their minds about SBF yet?
Yeah, I don't think it will be that challenging. It's not disqualifying if the person's heard of this case. What you ultimately care about is that they haven't heard enough, or really what matters is that they haven't formed an opinion that's going to infect their impartiality. So, if they have some kind of passing familiarity with the case, that's not going to be disqualifying. It's going to be, from both sides, you're going to be looking more at the characteristics of the potential juror, and how they would view the facts. Then you're going to be concerned about whether or not they have, some sort of passing familiarity. For sure, you're not going to select somebody that has a deep familiarity that's been following this, because that person's likely to have formed an opinion.